And our response to these latest tariffs is to fight, is to protect, and to build. We will fight.
The current trade conflict between the United States and Canada has been defined by significant and unprecedented action. The Trump administration's decision to increase tariffs on a variety of Canadian exports to a formidable 35%. Welcome viewers to my channel. If you're new here, please subscribe, like my video, and turn on notifications so you don't miss our next update. This move is far more than a simple economic measure. It represents a fundamental departure from the historical norms of one of the world's most integrated and cooperative bilateral relationships. This is a politically charged conflict where economic measures are being used to address a complex and emotional national security issue, namely the flow of illicit drugs, and it stands as a hallmark of President Trump's aggressive America First trade agenda. The decision to impose such a substantial tariff is a clear signal that the U.S. is willing to use economic power to exert political pressure on its closest allies. The sheer scale of the tariff increase, particularly when applied to such a broad range of goods, has sent shockwaves through the Canadian economy and has created a deep sense of uncertainty about the future of cross-border trade. This action marks a new era in the U.S.-Canada relationship, one where the long-standing principles of free and fair trade are being subordinated to nationalistic and protectionist policies. The tariffs are not only a challenge to Canada's economic health, but also to the very foundation of the North American trading system. The U.S. government's justification for the tariffs is a powerful and emotive narrative that paints Canada as an uncooperative partner in the fight against the devastating opioid epidemic. The White House's public statements have been both pointed and highly specific, asserting that the cross-border trafficking of fentanyl is a grave national emergency. To support this claim, the administration has cited a dramatic surge in fentanyl seizures at the northern border, presenting these figures as irrefutable evidence of a growing threat. Furthermore, the U.S. has introduced a highly provocative new allegation that Mexican cartels, traditionally associated with the U.S. southern border, are operating drug synthesis labs on Canadian soil. This narrative, which links economic sanctions directly to the protection of American lives, is a masterstroke of political strategy. It allows the administration to frame the tariffs not just as a tool for economic leverage, but as a necessary and moral action to safeguard public health and national security. The U.S. has also accused Canada of engaging in retaliatory trade measures that supposedly hinder rather than help in addressing the escalating drug crisis, a claim that further complicates any attempts at diplomatic resolution. This strategic communication effort by the U.S. administration aims to rally public support at home by portraying the tariffs as a defensive, even heroic, act in the face of a national health crisis. The emotional weight of the opioid epidemic is used to justify a policy that, under different circumstances, would be seen as a severe breach of diplomatic protocol. The administration's rhetoric is designed to bypass the traditional economic arguments against tariffs and instead appeal directly to the fears and anxieties of the American public, creating a political climate where such aggressive measures are seen as both necessary and justified. In a comprehensive and forceful rebuttal, Canadian Prime Minister Carney has articulated a position that stands in stark opposition to the U.S. government's narrative. He has publicly expressed his government's disappointment and provided a wealth of data that directly challenges the central premises of the U.S. claims. Carney's government points to the fact that Canada accounts for a minuscule fraction of the fentanyl entering the U.S., specifically less than 1% of the total volume. This data effectively places the primary source of the fentanyl crisis at the U.S. southern border with Mexico, a fact that has been widely corroborated by multiple sources, including the U.S. Drug Enforcement Administration's own assessments. To counter the U.S. allegations of inaction, the Prime Minister has detailed Canada's extensive and costly measures to enhance its border security and law enforcement capabilities. These measures, which he has described as historic, include a significant expansion of the country's border officer corps, the deployment of advanced aerial surveillance and other technologies, and the implementation of what he has called the strongest border legislation in our history. Carney's defense serves a dual purpose: to defend Canada's reputation as a committed and dedicated partner in security, and to portray the U.S. tariffs as an unmerited and counterproductive act against a long-standing ally. He has also emphasized the deep level of cooperation that has historically existed between the two countries' law enforcement agencies, suggesting that the tariffs are not only an attack on Canada's economy, but also a betrayal of this long-standing partnership. The Prime Minister's statements are designed to appeal to both domestic and international audiences, presenting Canada as a responsible global actor and the U.S. actions as a reckless and unfounded provocation. This carefully constructed response aims to deconstruct the U.S. narrative piece by piece, replacing emotional appeals with hard data and highlighting the inconsistencies in the U.S. position. The economic consequences of these tariffs are extensive and are expected to be particularly damaging to Canada, with the U.S. serving as the destination for roughly 75% of all Canadian exports. The 35% tariff on a range of goods not covered by the CUSMA trade agreement will have a significant and immediate ripple effect across the Canadian economy. Industries such as steel, aluminum, and certain agricultural products are likely to be hit hardest, leading to higher costs for businesses, disrupted supply chains, and a potential loss of market share. This economic pressure could lead to job losses and a broader slowdown in Canada's overall economic growth. For American consumers, the tariffs may lead to higher prices on a variety of goods, a classic consequence of protectionist policies. The Canadian government has already begun to consider its own retaliatory tariffs, which would further escalate the trade war and cause additional economic pain on both sides of the border. This tit-for-tat tariff strategy threatens to create a spiral of economic harm, undermining the very trade relationships that have been a cornerstone of North American prosperity. The ripple effects of this conflict are expected to go beyond the directly targeted industries. The uncertainty created by the tariffs could also deter foreign investment in Canada, as companies may become hesitant to invest in a country whose access to its largest market is suddenly in jeopardy. This could have long-term consequences for Canada's economic competitiveness and its ability to attract and retain global talent. The tariffs are not just a one-time financial hit. They introduce a level of instability that can erode business confidence and disrupt long-term planning, affecting everything from manufacturing to agriculture. Beyond the immediate economic impact, the dispute is a major political issue. The U.S. Commerce Secretary Howard Lutnick has signaled that the tariffs are not necessarily permanent, suggesting they could be withdrawn if Prime Minister Carney starts turning on the charm and if he takes off his retaliation. This statement is telling, as it frames the tariffs not as a final measure but as a bargaining chip. It places the political and economic burden of de-escalation squarely on Canada, forcing them to decide whether to comply with U.S. demands or to stand firm and risk further economic harm. This strategic use of tariffs as a tool of political leverage is a recurring theme in the Trump administration's foreign policy and represents a new and challenging dynamic for Canada. The Secretary's language, which is both condescending and overtly political, underscores the fact that this conflict is less about economic policy and more about a power struggle between two leaders. The implication is that the tariffs are a tool to force a change in Canadian policy and behavior, rather than a genuine effort to solve a problem. This approach creates a difficult political situation for Prime Minister Carney, who must balance the need to protect Canadian economic interests with the need to maintain his government's sovereignty and political dignity. Any perceived capitulation to U.S. demands could be seen as a sign of weakness at home, while a refusal to negotiate could lead to further economic damage. The tariffs are, in essence, a test of Canada's resolve and a challenge to its ability to chart an independent course in the face of immense pressure from its most powerful neighbor. In response to this increasingly hostile trade environment, Prime Minister Carney has outlined a new strategic direction for Canada that seeks to reduce its vulnerability to such pressures, while maintaining that his government will continue to negotiate with the U.S. Carney is also committed to a long-term strategy of building Canada strong. This strategy is centered on a policy of economic self-reliance, encouraging Canadians to be our own